Good evening and welcome to what will be the penultimate episode of our live Magpie Circle YouTube and Twitter show. The final show will be later this week, and we're going to do that on the same day as the club announces its retained list, so that we can debate that a little more fully, and then we'll be signing off for at least June and a little bit of July while we all focus on the Euros. For tonight's show, who else but the Magpie Circle pundit of the year? He's just about got back from Torquay. He's clocked up a few hours up and down the motorway. Mark Stallard, delighted you're finally back.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah. After the journey down on Friday, we wondered whether we'd even make the game. Yeah, delighted to be back. Not delighted with the result and the end of it, and then we're talking about the end of the season. But yeah, good to be back on.
I'm surprised while you were down there that you didn't pop in for tea with Boris and Joe at Carbis Bay Hotel. I've been there, by the way. And everyone keeps going about it's a 5-star resort. When we went down there, it was about £80 secret escapes. You know, it's not kind of what it looks like on the telly, I can assure you.
I guess I don't imagine Boris and them staying in them sort of digs, are they? They're £80 a night. They're having a jolly up with whatever rules they're making up themselves, aren't they? But yeah, we'll leave them to get on with that. That's them and us situation. That.
Yeah, and I gather a little bit of lightheartedness before we get into the serious stuff. You had a round of golf with a good friend of the Magpie Circle show, former teammate, scorer of the Great Escape goal, Kevin Nicholson.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, despite getting stuck in traffic, despite a 6.5-hour journey down there, we were scheduled. You know, me and Charlie sort of said he'd found this golf course because Charlie knows the area well. Obviously, growing up down there, he's that's how he knows Mark Ellis and what have you. So we got this tea time, but we're going to play 9 holes. Tea time booked at about 5:20. Of course, we didn't get down. We left Notts at 12 o'clock. I met him in Notts at 12. We got down there at about 5:45, 6 o'clock, something like that. And we ended up having to push the tea time back. We teed off at 6:45. Nico came and joined us. And somehow we managed to race around because obviously nobody in front of us. We've got 18 holes in. Although the last two or three were, I mean, they obviously eat more carrots than me. They could see the ball. Charlie won on the last green by 1. He held a 10-foot putt to win on the last. Me and Nico to beat us by 1. But I claim I couldn't see anything for the last 4 or 5 holes anyway. So with my age, I get an extra shot handicap, I think. But yeah, it was good to see him.
It's a pity Ian Burchnall wasn't on was on international duty because isn't he a bit of a bandit? He got a hole in one. Nico was telling us in the show he did with us.
Yeah, Barry's a good golfer. I always remember he'd been a good golfer. Ward he was as well. There were a few good golfers back in the day. Yeah, but Nico's all right. Yeah, he's okay. He gave us the excuses before we started, saying he's not played for a year and all this sort of thing. So yeah, of course you haven't. Yeah.
Right. Let's get down to business. Lots of messages, observations, questions already flooding in. A lot focusing, as we might understand, on the retain list. We don't have a definite date for when that's coming out. It is expected to be this week. The manager or the head coach has gone public to say that he wishes to speak to all the players first. So that may take a day or two. You will obviously hear about that as soon as it is announced. Now, just so you can sort of cogitate upon before Mark and I discuss it in a little more detail, here's a rough guide to the senior players and their contractual positions. So under contract, we have Wootton, Knight, Rodrigues, Sam, Roberts, Reeves, Lacey, Brindley, and we can add in Tyrese Palmer, who stepped up on a pro contract from the academy. Loan players going back to their clubs: Knowles, Ellis, Miller, Griffiths. And then those players who are out of contract and the club has a decision to whether or not to offer them a new contract: Slocum, Turner, Rawlinson, McCrory, Chickson, Barnett, Kelly Evans, O'Brien, Doyle, Boldewijn. So 9 under contract, 10 out of contract, 4 loans going back. There might be the odd change there, so don't send me all the messages. Broadly speaking, that is what Notts County have to deal with. Before we go into the whys and wherefores of that, Stell, What more could Notts have done to have got a result in that game that they didn't ultimately get?
Well, I think the obvious answer is defend balls into the box, the old Achilles heel. You know, the worst possible start, obviously, first minute, 35 seconds. Danny Wright wins a header, ball into the box, short throw, allowed the cross in, and first contact. First contact in penalty area, say it all the time on commentary. It's massive. The coaches say all about it. First contact in each penalty area is absolutely massive, and they got it for the first and the third goal, wasn't it? Asa Hall's goal. You know, the old Achilles heel, same thing. And after that, you know, they played quite well. You know, they controlled possession and dominated like that. But you just felt that every time there was a set piece, every time there was a ball going into the Notts penalty area, that we looked vulnerable. And you concede 4 goals in a game, Paul, even though it was 120 minutes. You're not going to get anything. We conceded 2 the week before at Chesterfield. You know, it's become a bit of a theme. Like I say, it's not just a one-off. You know, one-offs you can sort of brush them under the carpet. When things become a bit of a running theme, that's when you know something's got to be done to address it. So I'm sure Ian Burchnall will be aware of it. He said about it in post-match interviews, you know, towards the end of the season, about this profligacy we've got in terms of defending our own penalty area. On occasion, I think back to Wrexham, they were excellent. You know, the bombardment they took in the second half there, excellent. So, you know, but you've got to have consistency in football. The better players, the better teams have that consistency. So on Saturday, you knew how Gary Johnson's team lined up. You knew how they were going to set up. I mean, I don't think anybody could have read that. Have played the lad Cameron on the left wing. You know, he played up front the week before, I think, at Altrincham as a bit of an experiment. But, you know, you didn't think he was going to play left wing. But that's what they did. They hit balls towards him. They put balls in the box when they got the opportunity. And although Notts dominated possession, although they controlled the game, although I wouldn't say they hit top gear really, but, you know, they played all right. Torquay defended well. Torquay, you know, got organised, got bodies back. They still conceded 4 goals in a game where they're dominating possession. And that is a massive weakness that you're not going to get anywhere with.
With that, and we'll read all the observations out, but this kind of leads on from the points that you've been making there, Mark. Duncan Conry says, for the second playoff campaign, Rawlinson was omitted from a crucial game. He, of course, didn't play any part in the playoff campaign last year. Do you think that decision could have cost us a game?
Well, I certainly feel for Conor Rawlinson, because he must have think he's run over a black cat to miss out in these playoff games. Could it have cost us? Look, I'm not one of these if, buts and maybes guy. You know, you make your decision, you make your bed, you lie in it. Could it have cost us? Of course it could. But then again, you put Conor Rawlinson in, you maybe don't dominate possession quite as well. He played the home game before, didn't he, Chesterfield, and then got withdrawn at half time. So that was a bit of a clue with what happened at Chesterfield, that he's not going to start the game. You wouldn't have thought against Torquay on Saturday, and that's the way it proved. In hindsight, of course, with how things went, you could make an argument to say we could have had Rawlinson and Ben Turner at the back, because they'd have been more suited to defending, but they wouldn't have been suited to us bringing the ball out from the back and playing with the ball as much. So I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm sure Conor Rawlinson will you know, be gutted he missed out again and wonder what he's done. But, you know, it sort of led on from the Chesterfield game, didn't it? That the fact that he was withdrawn at half time and he went with we called it previously, the attacking lineup, if you like, of Brindley as a right centre half, Chickson as a left centre half, and Mark Ellis, the only real centre half in the team. You know, you basically put in a centre half with 2 out and out fullbacks and making them play the wide centre half role. So, again, every plus in football has got a negative. There's an upside and a downside. You have ball players, and we might well come on to this, Paul, in a little bit of a while, because when we're talking about recruitment for next season, what will Ian Burchnall have a look at? Where will we need to strengthen? We've definitely got to strengthen that ability to defend balls into the penalty area, whilst at the same time he won't want to lose the ability of centre halves to get on the ball and set us up and play and maybe step into the lines, step into midfield with it. So it's like a seesaw of a balancing act. That is, Do you go for your out-and-out defender, which in this case would have been Conor Rawlinson, or do you go for your ball-playing defender who may be weaker aerially, but possibly or probably better on the ball and give you better distribution, which would be Richard Brindley on that scenario for the sort of right centre-half spot. He went with Brindley. You know, who's to say whether if he'd have gone with Rawlinson, anything different would have happened. But that will be the dilemma he's got for the next season for coming up. And I'm sure he's been thinking about that already.
Yeah, and you kind of almost preempted the question I was going to ask you there, because Charlie mentioned this in his interview, and it was addressed by Ian, and Ian was saying that he kind of wants the ability to play out of the back, which isn't, you know, there aren't too many 6'5" aerially dominant centre halves that can play with both feet. You know,
certainly not national
when he fell out, when he got injured, there was stuff. My point is, to find one of those is not easy. So it becomes a balancing act. How achievable do you think it is to get success in the National League? And success here is getting back into the Football League. It's not about percentages of possession or control of games. It's not about balls into the box. It's not a statistically based analysis. It is about getting back into the Football League. I think everybody at Notts County would agree. How achievable is it to play a certain way and maybe not have certain core components of a team that formulaically Sutton had, Harrogate had, Barrow had, and they're kind of the three teams, and I would suggest that both Torquay and Hartlepool have. But at this moment, not even if they have them, if you're looking at a Turner and Rawlinson, it would appear to be our head coach's desire to play slightly differently to that tried and trusted formula at National League level.
Yeah, it's really difficult. It is really difficult, as you alluded to, and as I think we all know. Ball-playing defenders who can defend, let's face it, they're struggling at it for the national team, aren't they? You know, they're arguing that over does Kyle Walker play as a sort of right-sided centre-half, but his defending isn't great, but he's getting forward, you know, all that sort of thing. And it's always about, it comes down to the manager. What do you like? What do you prefer? But again, I'll make the case of, you go back to that Wrexham game, and it was Brindley, Ellis, Chickson as a back three, and they defended like Trojans. You know, they absolutely were, you know, balls into the box, and they defended it. So it's not one of them of saying, it's never as simple as saying, well, he can go forward, but he can't defend. But do we play him? You know, it's always like a sliding scale, like I say, a bit like a seesaw, generally, at this level particularly. The better you are with the ball, slightly weaker defensively as an out-and-out defender, you tend to be. As you said there, there's very few teams that have got ball-playing centre-halves, certainly not at National League level. So Torquay against Notts on Saturday was almost a complete polar opposite of how you can go about things at National League level, or at any level. But for the players at this level, you've got Torquay under Gary Johnson, big, physical, strong, pretty much all over the pitch. You know, and at times they looked awful. So to me, after they got that goal in the first half, sometimes they were just knocking it long, but aimless long ball. And that's when, you know, long ball football does look poor, really. Now, this is not, by no way am I disparaging Gary Johnson or his team or the way of playing football. It just, for periods of that game, they looked, oh, crap, we're protecting something here and we're not too worried about getting another goal. And not try to play the better football of it. But again, football is all about results. But they were two polar opposite teams, you know, trying to achieve the same goal, but going about it in two entirely different ways, set up by managers that have obviously different beliefs in football, which is also moulded as well by what sort of players you have. You know, and again, let's not forget, Ian Burchnall got the job on 24th, 25th of March. He's not been in the job 3 months yet. You know, so he's got to be allowed time, and he will now get the summer to change things and bring in what he needs to bring in, or what they feel they can get, and change things. So we'll come on to that in a bit. But Saturday for me was, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. But what you have to do is be effective at what you're doing. So if you're going long, do it effectively. And Torquay got over the line. They got over the line. But, you know, so you can say that they did it the most effective on Saturday. But we played them however many weeks before, got a 2-2 down there where we gave 2 soft goals away at the end. You know, still the same sort of way about it. It's the same sort of thing of the game. The contrasting styles, and there'll be a bit of a contrasting style against Hartlepool in the final when Torquay play Hartlepool, which I've got no interest in now. Obviously, now that's out. But I think Hartlepool, like you say, they've got a couple of big defenders. They've got a couple of big lads. They're not as big as Torquay, but Hartlepool do play good football. And they have good players and they can play good football, as we saw when we played up at Victoria Park not too many weeks ago. And they dismantled us a little bit, particularly in that first half. So football's all about implementing your game plan and doing it well. There's no one game plan that beats all. If you do it well, you win the game. If you don't, then more often than not, you get beat.
A few observations just coming in on this particular topic. We'll get to others that are looking more in terms of who we keep, who we release. James Spring, nobody to blame but ourselves for Saturday. Gave away 4 dreadful goals. They were a typical Gary Johnson team. Effective. Never thought we'd win the playoffs, but still gutted. Another season of failure. Kelvin Hallam, under current regime, no matter who's the head coach or manager, they will not be bringing in their own players. I think Kelvin there is talking about the recruitment policy with Richard Montague. The analysts will come on to that in a moment. And I think, like you said, there's no right or wrong. Chris B says this may be a controversial opinion, but I'd rather watch Notts playing the way we are and staying in National League than watching the way we were playing under Neal Ardley and getting promoted. That's an interesting one. I've got to say, I am at the other end of the. I'm down the other end of the road there, Chris. I will watch paint dry if we win 1-0, 46 games next season. I don't care if we have 3% possession every game next season. We're horrible to watch. Yeah, and we win.
Yeah, I mean, and again, what I would say is that I wouldn't class Neal Ardley as at the other end of the spectrum from Ian Burchnall. I think they're not massively dissimilar in the way they go about the games. I know people will say Neal Ardley was a more defensive-minded coach, and maybe the stats will back that up to a slight extent. But like I say, there's no right or wrong way about it. But football is about winning. It's about winning. It's about getting the job done. Torquay got it done. You know, I want to see Notts play in League 2 and then in League 1 and then in the Championship and up and above that. I don't want to sit in the National League any longer than we absolutely have to. But I do want to watch good football as well while we're doing it. And the two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can play good football. It's been proven time and again throughout. You can play good football, but you've got to play good winning football. And that involves doing the ugly stuff as well as doing the pretty stuff. It's doing the ugly stuff that buys you the time and the right to play the pretty stuff. You've got to earn the right. It's that old saying that's been around in football forever. That's what it is. You've got to work hard out of possession. Look at the very best teams, that your Man Cities and you know, your teams like that, your Barcelonas. They work so hard out of possession of the ball. I'm talking Barcelona from a few years back, obviously, but they work so hard out of possession of the ball, but they've got all the best players on the ball. So when they get the ball, they can do the pretty stuff, but they work so hard out of possession of the ball. And that's what Notts have got to find at their level. That's that little balancing act, this little seesaw you've got to find between players who can play, but players who dig in and roll their sleeves up and do the ugly stuff when it gets tough, when you're down at, you know, wherever, Maidenhead, Kings Lynn on a Tuesday night in January, February, when the wind's blowing a gale and there's 200 people there or whatever there might be. It's all right wanting to play pretty football. You've got to earn the right to do it. And like I say, it's always a balancing act.
Before we move on, you mentioned a point there about you personally feel Neal and Ian are not necessarily poles apart in their approach. And I think also, you, as always, you're very diligent. You've done a bit of homework. I mean, my question to you, how different are we at this stage with Ian Burchnall having taken over for the last, I think you've got the comparable stats, 17, 18 games, compared to where we were under Neal Ardley, who, of course, congratulations to Neal, who's now got the job at Solihull Mars. How far apart do you think we are or aren't?
I don't think we're too far. What Ian Burchnall's done well, and like I say, the stats do back that we are slightly more. We are more attacking. We are more of a threat going forward than we were at the back end of Neal Ardley's reign, because we were bang out of form, low on confidence. But again, the stats of that, the last 3 games of Neal Ardley's reign before he got the sack, not scored 2 in each game. But we know the performances weren't great. So again, Neal Ardley's gone. That's that. And Ian Burchnall's come in and done a pretty good job since he's come in. But the stats, as I've got it here, 19 games. If you include Hornchurch and the 2 playoff games, Ian Burchnall's took charge in 19 games. He's won 8, lost 8, drawn 3. Okay. Neal Ardley took charge at 26. So 7 more games. He's won 5 more, lost 2 less this season. Won 13, drawn 7, lost 6. The stats where it will back up the fact that you'd say Ian Burchnall's put an emphasis on not going forward is the fact that in the 19 games we've scored 34 goals, as against the Neal Ardley's 26 games we scored 36 goals. So there's a gnat's whisker, really. You know, they're not showing me chalk and cheese. And again, you can interpret stats however you want, and we'll come on to that, I'm sure, when it comes to recruitment. But the stats tell me that Notts score more goals, but they also concede more goals under Ian Burchnall. That's what the stats say. So on a game-by-game or an average per-game basis, we concede more, but we score more. Not loads more in either column, but that's what the stats say. Now, that just backs up the fact that if you play a more attacking, expansive game, you're more vulnerable to being caught, you know, at the other end. So how different are they? I think they both like to play football. They both like to play through the lines. So that's why I don't think they're different. What I don't think we've gone from Neal Ardley's way of playing football to Ian Burchnall's way of playing football. There is not a Gary Johnson stepping stone in the middle of them. That's what I'm saying. Gary Johnson's up completely different end of the spectrum. And it might well be Gary Johnson gets his team out of the National League and we all look at it and going, you know, maybe that's the way to do it. But it's not really. It's just there is no way to do it. It's about getting the bunch of players that you've got, getting the style of football that you want to play, getting everybody knowing what they're doing and getting them to do it well. And that's why Sutton have been the best team all season, most consistent team, because the league table tells you that the best they've gone up, and they've got, you wouldn't say they've got any superstars in the team, but they have got some good players at this level. They've got pace, they've got attacking threat, they've got solid midfield players, and they've got a solid defence with two decent centre halves who can head it, kick it when it starts getting a little bit ugly, and they've got an outlet going forward. And at this level, you don't need too much more. At any level, you don't need too much more. But again, it's levels in the game. As you go up, you've got to be slightly better. But I think Sutton have been consistently the best team. You wouldn't say they play Gary Johnson style football. You also wouldn't say they play Ian Burchnall style football, you know, passing through the, you know, they mix it up and they found a way. But what they do is they play winning football. And that's why they sat top of the table. And that's where Notts have got to get to for next season. You know, that's the improvement that's needed this summer, recruiting that little bit extra. We're not a million miles away, but by the same token, we weren't banging on the door of Sutton's shirt tails, you know. So we finished 5th for a reason. Not a great season from my, you know, if we're being brutally honest about it, not a great season. Things took an upturn last 9 games. You know, things took an upturn and some real promise there. And again, that goes in the plus column for Ian Burchnall. When he was given a bit of time to work with players, there was an upturn in performances and there was an upturn in it. But we didn't get over the line. So it's not a successful season. It's a disappointing season. Now they've got to take that on. They've got to analyse quickly why it was disappointing, what ingredients, shall we say, are missing, and identifying the right players to come in and get them working and integrate them into the group to fill the gaps that we think we might need for next season.
Chloe Page, who's a regular on our show, she summed it up quite well. She said to me, you know, in the last 4 years that I've been watching Notts County, we've had 3 playoff campaigns, and in the other one, we got relegated out of the Football League. So for all sorts of reasons, the last 4 years have been, you know, very much an emotional roller coaster. It's very easy to forget under Kevin the playoff season with Coventry. Now, so if you look at the playoff losing to Coventry, there was clearly a hangover, and clearly as well, recruitment was a disaster area that summer. Notts made a very poor start. The panic button was hit. Kevin left. We made the playoffs under Neal, having been relegated, and there wasn't really a hangover. We've probably been the most consistent team in the National League over the past 2 seasons. If you look at the teams that have been successful this year, by and large, they were all in the bottom half of the table. Sutton finished 14th or 15th last year. So, how do you think the club reacts to losing in this playoff? Will it be positive next year, or is there going to be a hangover?
Well, they can't afford to be a hangover. They can't afford to be a hangover. Look, I take this hangover thing. People always throw that out there. There's a hangover. At the end of the day, it's poor performances. That's what a hangover is. It's players not playing well. It's a team not gelling for whatever reason. Maybe they make, whatever reason it might be, too many new introductions, or a confused style of play, or messages not getting across. But bottom line, like me as an ex-player, always looks at players first. Always look, how are you playing? And what you're doing? Are you executing the basics properly? I give an example this season. Ruben Rodriguez, I think, has been probably the most talked about player probably this season. Or you could even use Kyle Wootton as an example. But both players at the attacking end of the pitch who haven't had a consistent season. They've had decent seasons. Kyle Wootton with all his goals, but he went on 12, 13 games without a goal. We had nobody in backup to sort of bring him out. Nobody in backup to sort of say, Carl, come and have a rest for a couple of weeks. Get your head right. Whatever. You just go away, rest yourself, and come back in. Ruben Rodriguez has been fantastic these last 9 games. 10 games, whatever it might be, since he was poor at Altrincham but scored that worldy free kick. But since then, looks like a rejuvenated player. He's shown flashes throughout the season, but nothing really more than that. Again, can he take that on over a season? Can he do that consistently? And this is what, for each individual player, for each individual position, these are the decisions, or the discussions and the decisions that are going to have to be made about each player, saying, for this season, we've ultimately not reached where we need to be. So we were 10 points behind Torquay, who we played on Saturday, 10 points in the league in 42 games. Not good enough. So we need to bridge that gap and then get on to whoever's going to be Sutton for next year, which we hope is going to be Notts. So you need that 2-point a game margin, and they've got to identify how they do that. And they need players like Sutton have managed this season, like Torquay largely, but Sutton have managed to have consistent results week in, week out, and go and get the job done. And they've got to identify how they do that. What is most important? I don't think they're going to have wholesale changes. I certainly hope not. I think they need some continuity going through this. Like I say, not everything is wrong. There's a lot of good, but they just need to add to it, and they need to improve in certain areas. And this is what they've got to decide. Is Ruben Rodriguez going to be, and we'll come on to a couple of players, obviously Cal Roberts, who's not been available this season, but is Ruben Rodriguez going to be trusted to be your number one playmaker, and so they feel they don't have to go out and strengthen in that area? That's a decision they've got to make. Kyle Wootton, your main striker, do you go out and buy somebody to play alongside him, or somebody who can do his job if he gets injured? We've said it this season. If Kyle Wootton gets injured, I know we had Innie Effiong for a bit, but we had nobody that could come in and do what he does for the club, be that, the big target man, play with his back to goal, but also get goals as well, come back for set pieces, defend, do all that sort of stuff. And when he's going through a barren run, you need somebody to be able to go, come on out for a bit. We'll put somebody else in, because we've got somebody who can go and do that job. And you've got them sort of decisions all over the pitch. But obviously, the 2 main bits for me, up at the attacking end, we've got to have more backup for Kyle Wootton in terms of goals, in terms of goal threat. and at the other end, we've got to find a way of not conceding when the ball comes into the box.
Lots of very good observations and points that I'll read a few out now. And this kind of almost shows the huge polar opposites in the way we as fans view watching Notts County, what we want, what we don't want. Steve Ramage, promotion, relegation, and what league we are in is almost irrelevant on a day-to-day basis. I agree that I would rather see Notts playing good football than poor football. He does add, but I do want us to compete and win. This season we had chances, but didn't convert them over and over. Miles Kirkland, no point messing around with playoffs, title or bust. I do detect from many messages on Twitter and tonight, there's a real fear over the playoffs among fans because, you know, we haven't done very well in them recently. And a lot of people saying, oh, we're going to storm the division. I'll ask you your thoughts on that in a moment. Ian, NCFC Pie, we've had 2 seasons in National League, both times affected by COVID, and neither have been a normal season, yet managed playoffs both times. We just need a normal season, playing averagely good, and could take the title. Miles Kirkland, full season with us back at the Lane will drive us on next season. Away at Grimbo, first game of the season. Fish and chips from Cleethorpes Pier, no doubt. Ian Burchnall, the one thing Sutton was good at this season was consistency. That's what we need. RM, the owner said when they bought Ian Burchnall, it was a long-term project. So I think the club will not have a hangover. I think they were ready for another season in the National League. Mr. Neal H.O., we need a 6-foot-plus battering ram type striker to play alongside Wootton. Aaron Porter, I can't even pronounce it. Shimishanga is an incredible player. With the speed we have on the wings, he will be a brilliant addition. The replacement for Dennis that we never got. Then, of course, we get completely the opposite spectrum. Kelvin Hallam, never in a million years going to storm this division. Will be interesting on the retain list. I reckon we need someone a bit of pace to play off Wootton. Matt Ben Knotts, Wrexham, Stockport, and possibly Grimsby and Southend may also have similar hopes for next year. Regulars on the show will know I bang the drum frequently over the past month or two and said getting up through the playoffs this time, that the squad was good enough to get into them, and this was by far our best chance of getting back up. We've had 2 years in the National League still. Obviously we don't get the parachute payments now. The fan base are almost split here. You know, we've made the playoffs. Ian is kind of like the Pep Guardiola of the National League. We're going to play this free-flowing football. We're going to control all the games, and we're going to storm the title. And then there's another view that actually it's a lot more competitive. You know, you look at, you know, if there's a signal of intent, it's getting one of the most respected figures, technical directors in English football, bar none, Les Reed, which Wrexham have got. Southend have come down, Grimsby have come down. You know, we've kind of seen the calibre in the playoffs of the teams of Torquay, Hartlepool and Stockport. And of course, there's probably only 12 teams we've been playing against this season in the second half that have been playing to get in the playoffs. The other 8, being realistic, he didn't give a damn because they couldn't be relegated. So before we go and look at who we recruit and all the rest of it, do you think it's a really hard season for Notts next year? Or do you think that with the way we're starting to create something under Ian, that actually we could tear the division up?
Well, I'll wait till the recruit. I'll wait till the recruit before I'm going to stick me. Even I'm the most optimistic sort of Notts, you know, cheerleader out there. But even I, at this point, cannot say we're going to tear the league up. I'll wait till they've recruited. I'll wait till they get 1 or 2 players fit. It's going to be tough. It doesn't matter. I mean, joking aside, it doesn't matter about recruitment. It is going to be tough. You've got the teams there that you mentioned. Wrexham are not going to have a small budget this season. Neither are Stockport, who are now not going to get up. Torquay or Hartlepool, whichever one doesn't get promoted, will have another crack at it. You imagine will be up there. They've got the tools to be this close at them at this moment in time. We don't know what Southend and Grimsby state they're going to be in when they come down, but again, they get parachute payments or what have you. So, and then there's the other clubs down here, Chesterfield, that have made a signing that gave us a run for our money just a week ago, showing their intent with the signing of Danny Rowe and one or two others. So it is going to be tough. There's no two ways about it. I hope we go and storm it. I absolutely hope we do. I'm thinking nothing better, but it's going to be tough. Any football league season or any national league season, non-league season is tough because you are grouped on ability. That's what leagues are. That's what relegation and promotion provides. You're grouped on ability with similar ability groups, similar ability teams than yourself. So it will be tough. We're not a million miles away this season and last season, as you mentioned. We're not a million miles away from it, but we haven't been good enough. So there has got to be that distinct improvement. Like I said, but then there's half a dozen teams with real ambitions of saying if we recruit well, if we throw some money at it, we could take the league by storm. And it's never going to work like that. I don't know the last time a team took the league by storm. Even Barrow, started off last season, like a bullet out of a gun. They got reeled back in towards the end, and who knows what might have happened. So it's never going to be easy. And this is not. We know it's never going to be easy, are we? We're never going to make it easy, even if we do take the league by storm, which I hope we do. But it's a tough league. It is a really tough league for all the reasons we've spoke about, the difficulty of going to some of these grounds, some of the pitches that you play on to try and play a certain way, and just the inconsistency of players that play at this level. So what I would like to see is, and there's no quantifying this because it all comes down to the depth of the owner's pockets. But you've seen Chesterfield make a statement signing. We've seen Stockport make statement signings. Wrexham are going to make statement signings. They've made one off the pitch. I imagine they're going to do it for on the pitch for the recruitment. And there might be one or two others as well. I'd like to see Notts. I know the model might be try and bring them in from lower leagues and young lads and find a diamond and polish it up. But I'd like to see them make a statement signing, a statement of intent to go with all the good components that they've got already. But I'd like to see a statement of intent. But that comes down to whether the owners want to fund that. You can't be wealthier than you actually are. You can't be made to spend money that you haven't got or don't see as good business acumen, good business sense, because we've been down that road previously, and I wouldn't advocate that at all. But it may take a statement signing or something like that, some real stand up and take notice signings, maybe one or two, but real key signings to add the components, to add that quality in certain areas of the pitch that Notts are going to need. And if they can do that, then, who knows what's his space. But it's still going to be tough. Even if they do that, it's still going to be tough because all the other clubs are going to be battling for it as well, battling for that prize. And you go back into how football used to be. Who can spend the most? Who can spend the most to gamble the most? And who goes outside of their means? Certainly don't want the club to go outside their means. But if you're talking about winning the league, like any league, if you want to achieve something, it costs.
Very interesting. Very good points, particularly about the marquee or the statement signing. I get loads of thoughts coming in while you were talking. PJ defines, if the recruitment isn't right next season, then it will be our fourth season in this league the following year. Joseph Spinks, plenty to be optimistic about. The basis of a good squad and an attractive playing style. Kelback, hopefully, and Ruben now being played. Could be delicious. Miles Kirkland, the opposite view. We will be down here for years yet. Danny Rodwell, interesting. I'm not looking forward to another season in the same league, but I am looking forward to more podcasts. Keep up the good work, lads. Creep. Kieran, thank you very much. Kieran Scott, we will do well to keep hold of Wootton. We must ensure we do that, though. Centre forwards like him are very hard to come by. Dale Pikett. The league will be so much stronger next season with all the ex-league teams in it now. Do you think sign some big names to show a sign of intent? You've just answered that. John Parr, cannot afford to stay in the National League any longer than we need to. Winning football all day long is what counts. NCFC Pie, to be honest, does it really matter what league we're in? I'll support Notts in League Two or National League. I think a lot of the games have been more exciting than League Two, at least more games on TV in NL on BT. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point you raised there, NCFC Pie, but, you know, you, me, Stells, doing the commentary for Radio Nottingham are not the issue. You know, if we got relegated and if we were in National League North, yeah, I would still be there. I would still have a season ticket. I suspect you would as well. So we're not really the issue. But the reality is that if you're not playing in the highest possible standard that your fan base thinks you should be playing in, and that you're not winning games, you will see attendances plummet. You will. You know, you know, we won't take 800 to Dover next season because most of our fans have already been there before. I think you have to have winning football, and I think in all these things, Stel, you have to have hope, don't you? If you haven't got hope, you know, and it was a little bit like this towards the end of the Ray True era. You know, if you've not got hope, what is that? It becomes, you know, it becomes drudgery.
Yeah, you've got to have hope, but you've got to have something to. You've got to have something to support, to cheer. Like I say, it's a two-way street. When you talk about games, players have got to give the fans something to cheer, something to get excited about, players to get excited about. But sometimes then players do need the fans. You need, like we saw it when the fans came back, what a difference it made. And I say, ultimately, you know, they made the difference down at Torquay, unfortunately, with the happy clapper plastic bumming things that irritated the noise that they made. But by the by, but yeah, you've got to have hope. You want to, and that's why. I'd rather, you know, given the choice, I'd rather see Notts play Ian Burchnall style of football than I would Gary Johnson's week in, week out. But that's not to say, well, don't you want to get out of this division? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I want to get at it upwards, not downwards. You mentioned National League North. Please don't do that to us. But it's not mutually exclusive. So there's a way of playing that is winning successful football. It's about having, again, we go round in this loop. You've got to have good enough players, good enough manager, and systems and ability to do it, and everyone know what they did, what their jobs are. You know, and it goes back round and round in a circle, and players have got to play well enough and know what their jobs are. And you know, even though I was just said about having a marquee signing, Sutton got promoted. They didn't have a marquee signing. They're not a marquee player amongst them, really.
Very good loan acquisition, wasn't it? Very good loan acquisition.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they had Alafi once he was he Millwall. And a few others as well, but you know, no one player. The leading scorer in the division, Cheek, was at Bromley. You know, there's no one player that's really took it by storm. So, as much as I say that, it's not an absolute fundamental. You don't absolutely, if you don't go out and spend $3-4 grand a week on a player, that means you've not got the ambition you don't want to achieve, because it is possible. But again, it's down to getting the recruitment right, getting the manager to get the system right, and players knowing what their job is and being good enough to implement it and stand up in all conditions, in all sorts of games and all sorts of match situations. It's the jigsaw pieces. It's like putting a jigsaw together for a football team. It's always the same. Every player has certain strengths, weaknesses, bits they're good at, bits they're not so good at. And it's trying to get your jigsaw pieces that can actually fit together the best, rather than getting one from different boxes that they all look good individually. They look like a perfect jigsaw piece, but they don't fit together. And that's the difference in a team. That's why good teams will always be individuals.
Good message from Colin Metcalf. Sentiment aside, in a results-based industry, this has been another failure. To get out of this league, you need an element of non-league in the team. Players are given 100%, but changes are needed. G Scott 2703. This kind of now takes us into looking ahead, recruit individuals, and I think this is quite a good observation. There has been a lot of discussion about our recruitment process. This year has been a mixture of successes with some not so good. How do you feel the current process? How do you feel about the current process? Is it too regimented? So before we go into he's out of contract, we should give him a contract, etc., etc., etc. The model that has been explained in the interview with Charlie, with Lee Curtis, is that Ian is a head coach. Ian will be guided, will give blueprints of types of players he wants. Richard Montague and a team of video analysts using data and video from their existing resources will identikit, source, suggest players, broadly speaking, on a data ball stroke money ball approach. How comfortable or how confident are you? Because this will be the first time this model is going to be used in its entirety. We kind of had a hybrid model last year with Neal still having traditional values, and I think we could all see the players that he wanted and the players that were being suggested by Football Radar and Richard Montague and his group. Now it's clear, and this is a good thing, that the head coach and Richard Montague and his team and the approach outlined from the top by Alexander and Christoph Reeves, everyone's off the same hymn sheet. How confident are you this is going to work this season?
Well, I'm not confident at all, but no more or less confident than any club using any approach, because there is no certainty about recruitment. Some of the best managers, some of the best eyes, some of the best scouts in football have got it wrong over the years. There is no such thing. A good player is a good player at one club, can go to another club, and everything might be pointing that's a great signing, and it doesn't work for whatever reason. So recruitment is not an exact science. So the process, I was one with Charlie. I was saying, because I'd heard the murmuring. I know what we're getting at, aren't we? It's this Moneyball approach. It's logarithms, it's algorithms, it's this, that, and the other. How does it work? And I was thinking Charlie and Lee, see if you can get them to speak about and explain to the fans what it is. And I thought Richard Montague spoke well, and Ian Burchnall spoke well when they were asked about it. They explained that using this data, it's not just a case of somebody reels off a computer list of 500 data points and go, well, he looks a good player, we'll sign him, like perhaps they do on, I don't play football computer games, but perhaps that's how he looks like on football computer games. It has no bearing on real life. Like I've said to you, and I'll say to anybody, if you've got the data via the Football Radar, why on earth wouldn't you use it? Because it's a fantastic research tool. But like any data, the most important thing is how you interpret that data. Interpretation of what makes a player a success. And for me, that goes beyond data. That, it's using data, but using it allied with your eyes. And I think that's pretty much what they explained was what happens. Data is used to whittle down, the wheat from the chaff, if you like. That data's used to put people forward, and then they have a look with their eyes and try and combine the two. Now, if that's how things work, then it's got every chance. Why wouldn't you use data? If you've got this big company behind you that employ the 200 people that they say that's watching football and analysing football statistics 24/7 virtually, why wouldn't you use it? Does that guarantee success? No, of course it doesn't. My one sort of area of concern, and I've said this before, for me, is that you've got all these intelligent people looking at data of football. You've got Ian Burchnall, who's shown he's a really good coach, can turn things around, looks like he wants to play attacking football and play the right way. There's not a lot of football experience, playing experience in and amongst it. And I'm not one of these that says you've got to be an ex-player to be a manager. I don't believe that at all, because some of the best managers have not had great careers and not had any career. So I'm not one of them, but I do think players with experience should be in the mix, just like I think players should be helping board at board level because they've got experience of agents and things like that. That's a conversation for another time. But I think you need players who can maybe interpret the data in a different way to somebody who's not played the game. You can show me some stats and somebody else some stats, and we can come up with two totally different things. And I think we were on about this before with Beth, wasn't she, when she was on, saying about the use of stats in the game now is obviously far more widespread anyway. So we talk about a Moneyball philosophy at Notts. Well, it's done well at Brentford and it's done well at Barnsley. But obviously there are times when it doesn't do so well. So they don't get talked about. But I think if you've got the data, why wouldn't you use it? But again, it comes down to making the right decision. Somebody, which we think is Ian Burchnall, has got the final say on players, and that's how it should be, because it's his team playing his way, and he should have the final say on players. Whether you call him a head coach or a manager, I don't care. It doesn't matter one way. But what I do think has got to happen is that one person has got to have the final say on it, and so then you get come back on it, and for his own good, he can sit in board meetings and say, well, look, I told you I wanted X player or Y player, you didn't give it me, and things haven't gone how we thought they were going to go, or vice versa, you had the players, you identified X, Y, and Z, and we gave you them players, why aren't we? And there's accountability for it, rather than it being passed. And what we've had before is with sort of these, remember the transfer committee, if you like, the recruiting players by committee, Guy Branston and Ricardo Muniz, and you ended up with two polar opposites. And I like the fact that they're all aligned and singing from the same hymn sheet, and it's dictated from the top, the Reach brothers down, the way of playing, how we want to do it. So we've recruited a manager that's going to play that way, and he knows what his remit is. We've got all these analysts that know what the remit is. We know what sort of players we're looking for. So hopefully that means they can all bring it all together and identify some gems. But again, if it was as easy as just using data, every club in the land would be doing it, and they are to a certain extent at the top end. I know they are, but again, football is not an exact science. That's what's so beautiful about it. The fact that any sport, anything can happen on any given day. You can't put a data. You don't know if your star signing is going to get an injury and rule him out for the season. Cal Roberts, we've missed all season. Alex Lacey hasn't been spoken about much, but he's been a big miss this season, I think. Certainly, back end of the season. So you can't quantify players getting injured, but what you can try and do is make sure that the squad is full of players that don't weaken the team when the inevitable happens and you have to rotate. You were dead right at the start. Like every recruitment model, this season there's been some hits, there's been a few misses as well, and to muddy the waters even more, it's not just a black and white, is he any good, how's he been? Money comes into it as well, because all these players are getting paid, don't forget. It's not just playing for a championship manager where you just sign who you want, or so I believe, I don't play, like I say, but you don't just get to sign who you want, a fancy football team and that's it. These are real players earning real money, taking real money from the club to be employed by them. So again, there's a certain budget for the playing budget, and they've got to allocate that, whether that's into a 22-man squad, a 20-man squad, but pay a little bit more, an 18-man squad and pay even more, or smaller squad and use the loan market. Whichever way you go about it, as long as everything's aligned, as long as everybody knows what they're doing, just like on a pitch, off the pitch, as long as everybody they're doing and nobody's treading on anybody else's toes, then you've got an accountability chain. And okay, I'm not one for the buck stops here, but you've got a manager who can manage the team with the tools that he's got. You take away any excuses. And for me, if you take away any excuses, that you've got clear lines, guidance and framework for everyone to work in, and players are the same. They want clear guidance and framework from the manager, from the coach, to know what is my job, what is expected of me. Yes, it's playing football at the best of your ability, of course, but it's how's that fit within the team framework. And if you can know that and absolutely nail it, there's no comeback. There is no comeback. And if everybody knows that, you've got all your ducks in line, then things should go swimmingly. But we know football, it doesn't always work like that. But that's how I like it. I see no problem with the process. Does that mean it's going to be a guaranteed success? No, of course it doesn't. We'll wait and see. Watch this space.
Again, very interesting. Here's something, because I spoke with you just before the start of the show. I don't think many Notts fans will know. Brentford would be kind of the living embodiment of how this approach can work extremely successfully into the Premier League. But how many of us know that the person who is tasked with heading up that whole Moneyball approach, director of recruitment, used to be at Notts County? And I'm just looking at the messages. Let's just see how quickly. Pythagorean is normally pretty hot on these things, but I can see nothing coming through at the minute. Nothing at all. Yeah. So the guy heading up Brentford was at Notts County. He was at Notts County under Keith Curle. His name was Lee Dykes, and he was an opposition analyst and away team analyst or scout working under Keith Curle, believe it or not, at Notts. That would have been about 2013. Spent about 18 months here. Went up to Carlisle, assistant up there. Then he became sporting director at Bury. Bury got promoted. Bury went bust. And then he got the job at Brentford. Now, that is a name that 99.9% of our fans would never have heard of and would never have known he worked for Notts County. I've dropped him a line and invited him to be one of our main kind of guests on the show, because I think it would be very, very interesting. And there it's kind of proof positive that clearly his stock now is very high. He was actually working at Notts County not that long ago. Interesting. We've nearly been going an hour. We better now start putting you on the spot, Stel. We're finally, I've been building up because the audience is growing all the time, because they're kind of like waiting to see who will Mark Stallard keep, who would he get rid of.
Well, I could waffle, Paul. It could go on for hours. This.
Right. So the first one. Well, let's just get a few observations. Pythagorean talking about data. He says that in a good source of data, other clubs' Player of the Year awards voted by supporters is a good database in its own right. Interesting. Even table of Vanarama teams of the week, also a good database too. You can see them old grizzled scouts, can't you? That would kind of tap into all of those things, and it becomes a starting point for them, and to work around. Yeah,
it's not a bad chat, particularly the player of the season. And if you'd find out the players' player of the season, because that is all who players rate, obviously. Now that's always one. It's like the end of the season player, team of the year, or team of the division awards that you get voted for by players. That really tells you who the players rate, and they're on the pitch playing against them. So there's no sentiment involved in that. It's about who's done the job.
Kevin J. Skriska Jr. kind of leads us on now to your first being on the spot. Given that IB and Doyle seem to so conducive to players' technical and tactical development, could not hope to market themselves as a top loan recipient team. Right. Okay. So let's start with Michael Doyle. Out of contract, fulcrum of the team since he arrived here, captain of the team, player/assistant manager. Fair to say Ian didn't exactly cover himself in glory with his appointment of Ian Ross, and results under that combination were pretty much a disaster area. Things have changed substantially since then. So Doyle is out of contract. So what would you do with him, Stel?
I'd try and keep him. I'd try and keep him on a playing assistant manager, exactly the role that he's had now. And I know like I say, he's not going to keep going forever, as much as fit as he is, as motivated as he is. And obviously, it's all right us playing this. Would I care? What would I do with him? It's what he wants to do. He might have other offers. You just don't know. But I would want to keep him. I think he's an asset for the club. And I said, not just for the team. I've spoke about him before. I think that's them sort of pros, them sort of his attitude more than anything else is an example, and it leads the dressing room. So yeah, I would make him one of the first priorities to keep in the club. I would have to maybe sit down with him and say, look, you tell me, how many games do you think you're going to play? And let's be honest, next season shouldn't be as hectic as this season's been, even though there might be more league games. It might be more Saturday to Saturday sort of rest time. He's not going to go on forever, but the question with all of these, Paul, before we even get to them, is can you go out and replace them with better for the same amount of money or less money? If you can, see you later. That's the way football works. But I think with Michael Doyle, what he gives you around the dressing room, off the pitch, keep him as keep him if you can. Make sure you can try and keep him in the building.
You would think then he is very important, both from a point of view of being on the pitch and almost as importantly off it, because since his demarcation to assistant to Ian, results improved remarkably. Clearly, if he were not to be here and was off to pastures new, then aside from any recruiting of players, you would think that Ian would be looking for a new assistant, because he probably can't do it all on his own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't think you'd be able to do it single-handedly at all. You just logistically, you need another coach for a 20-man squad, whatever you've got, because you sometimes want to work with defenders. What do you do with your striker? You definitely need a couple of coaches at least. So from Michael Doyle, I would make him, and I want to keep him at Notts, and I would want to keep him as part of it, or part of the playing staff as well, but maybe integrate him even more into the coach. The good run coincided with Michael Doyle sort of taking over from Maurice Ross. I'm not going to put it totally down to that. I'm not going to give Michael Doyle that much credit, of course. But I think he's an important character, an important leader around the place. Great experience. Yeah, like I say, at some point, the amount of appearances he's going to make may taper off. But I think for his example in training, for his longevity, for what he's done, yeah, I don't think there's too much question about it. I'd look to be keeping on a playing, coaching contract.
If we look down the spine of the team, core, and a lot of managers will speak of the importance of a core. And I think it's unfair to say keep, release each individual player. I don't want to put you on the spot, much as all our viewers would want you to. But what about if you look at goalkeeper's a key position. You don't normally get promoted unless you've got a pretty decent keeper. Harrogate, James Belshaw, friend of the show, Notts County fan, all his family are massive Notts fans. He was voted goalkeeper of the year when Harrogate went up, for instance. We've got Sam Slocum. Some people would allude to the model, and we don't really know this, but a lot of people allude to lowering the age, recruiting players with good resale value. Is that something you don't think applies as directly to goalkeepers? Because often goalkeepers can be at their very best over 30, which is not normally the case with many outfield players. What about Sam Slocum in goal?
Definitely key. I think he's the best goalkeeper in the division. I don't see a better goalkeeper out there. I think his handling is excellent. I think the number of mistakes he's made in a season, you can count on one hand. Absolutely no question I would keep him. But again, the caveat to that is how much money he's on. I've no idea what his contract is. If he's on $5,000 a week, then you might be able to replace him elsewhere for cheaper. But yeah, if it's you were just saying he sounds like, I think he's as good a goalkeeper as any in the division.
We spoke earlier in the programme, and I think everybody would agree, we need to man up when it comes to defending set pieces. Yeah, as you said, you can't concede 6 goals in 2 1/4 playoff games and expect to get through them, even if you're going to dominate possession away from home. It don't happen. So forget possession. You've kind of got to sort out defensively. Ben Turner and Connell Rawlinson are out of contract. They will be seen as 2 dominant style centre halves. The player that has kind of fulfilled that core role at centre half has been a lone player, Mark Ellis, hugely popular, done very well, but he's loan. He's going back to Tranmere. Do you look to change? You've still got Alex Lacey injured, but do you look to change around your central defensive options, or are you still looking to keep some of those players that I've just mentioned?
Well, I think again, going on what Ian Burchnall's been saying, I don't think they want wholesale changes, and I don't think they need wholesale changes. So I'd be looking to keep the nucleus. Now, Mark Ellis is a very interesting one because, obviously know how well he's done since he's come in terms of the goals that he's got and the input that he's had. The fact that the club haven't offered him anything yet surprises me a little bit, but also is that a bit of an indication to say we're not going to offer him anything, because he's put himself right in the shop window for himself. And you would think if you were desperate to keep him, you'd have made an offer before it becomes a free-for-all at the end of the season. So as much as I think fans might want to keep him, I don't know what the powers that be are thinking. But, you know, I think he'd be certainly be a good addition. Connell Rawlinson, again, it comes down to how you want to play. I would have said 4 weeks ago, I would have said absolutely you'd keep him. But the fact that, again, he got left out at the games when it mattered, or he got played and got took off, is Ian Burchnall looking at it thinking, I want a different sort of defender? And if that's the case, then there is no point keeping players you aren't going to play or don't want to play. I think Connor Royce is a really good centre half at this level, particularly. I think him and Alex Lacey at the start of the season were the reason why Notts had the best defence for the first half of the season, or whatever it was, the best defensive stats. I'd like to see Connell stay. I must admit, I think at this level he does a job, certainly. But I again, that's my personal opinion, but based on what Ian Burchnall might want to do and how he might want to play, he may decide he can get better for less money, or they might spend more money and get better. I don't know. But, you know, I would keep Connor Rawlinson. I'd like to keep Mark Ellis. Whether they are or not, we'll find out.
If you were prioritising, and I'm not saying a name, but if you were prioritising a single type of player, a position, or, you know, how that player plays in that position, what would you prioritise the most? What do you think is the single most important type of a position and a player Notts need?
Paul, that is the $64 million question.
That's what I'm saying is, do we need a really, really dominant centre half? Do we need, you know, a really powerful box-to-box midfielder? It's a bit of an unfair question, but it's more this kind of like formulaic, the way teams set themselves up in this division and things that are very vital to them.
The striker in me, Paul, would say we need an out-and-out goal scorer, somebody who's capable of getting 25 goals in a season. So
we need another Lee Hughes from somewhere, National League version of Lee Hughes.
Yeah, that'd do. Yeah, that'd do. Another Lee Hughes there. That's it. Problem solved. But yeah, that for me. I mean, I'm a striker, but I think with the way Ian Burchnall wants to play, I'm trying to do this pragmatically and not just, you know, dream sort of stuff. I think he wants an emphasis on attacking. He wants to control possession. He wants to dominate. So and fans want to see that. I'd rather see Notts play that way than see us play hoofball and sort of scrap away to results. But it needs to be winning football. But I think if you've got that threat, and you know, Michael Cheek, I say, has been the top scorer this season. There's nobody who's really absolutely set it light. None of the teams at the top have had anybody near 20 goals, if you like. The Torquay, Hartlepool, you know, they've got Rhys Oakes, I think the leading scorer for them. Sutton, I think the leading scorer only had sort of 12 or 13 goals for the season. So, you know, it's not an absolute requirement. But I think if you've got Kyle Wootton up front and somebody alongside him who can threaten, and I'm going to give you a Kabongo Shumanga from Boreham Wood. I'm not saying he's the one, but a player like that, and who's somebody who doesn't do a great deal outside the box, but is a real goal threat. I think you've got two goal scorers potentially up front then, and I go back to my days when we had people who could score 20 goals a season, and you had dual strikers. I know the game's different now, you don't always play with two strikers, but it's so much of a threat and it's so much of an outlet. And even when things aren't going well, you've got a chance of winning the game. Look, of course, I'd like another defender who could head balls and kick balls and keep things out at the other end as well. And I'd like another creative player, like a winger with pace, and, you know, I'd like a box-to-box midfielder who scores 15 goals a season as well. But I think if you're asking for one position, for me, the one position I think we've said most this season that we've missed out on is them just an out-and-out goal scorer. and ally that to a fit Carl Wootton, ally that to a Ruben Rodriguez in form, ally that to a fit Cal Roberts, hopefully touch wood, you know, ally that to a Calvin Miller or a Calvin Miller type going down the left side, somebody providing from the right hand side. I think with that will provide the potency to put us right up at the sharp end of the table. Again, you've still got to address the defence, of course, but one position that would be my one. Easier said than done. I'm not giving you a name as to who, but
no, I wouldn't expect it. I mean, I think I would. I don't disagree with you, but I would think it would be incredibly close run thing, because if you look, we've scored 5 goals in the last 2 games in the playoffs, right? And we've gone out of them. You know, and the old Kevin Keegan, you know, you can't keep winning 4-3. And if I look back to Neil Warnock, I even look back to Howard Wilkinson, you're too young. We had really, 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 really powerful centre halves, you know, intimidating. We spoke about nice football, but I think you need a bit of a fear factor as well, winning individual battles. Craig Shaw, alongside Dean Yates, was absolutely huge for Notts. You know, all the other players would say hated training, because Shorty played the training matches like he did the matches and used to whack everybody. And you know, a 17-year-old Brian Kilcline was also a pretty fearsome sight. And as you said earlier, we ain't going nowhere unless we sort out balls into the box, we sort out crosses and all the rest of it. And I think if you could pick your identikit of a player, I would love us to have that 6'4" absolute powerhouse who everyone was scared stiff of, half the centre forwards, never you, obviously, Stell, but you know, they suddenly go out and play left wing when they see this big hulk of a centre half. And I just think if there was an identikit, I think I'd be so much more confident we'd win games 1-0. Because at the minute, no matter how much, I'm sure Ian will get the possession sorted, but unless you quite rightly talk about Wrexham. I mean, we're brilliant, but that was a one-off. I think Gary Johnson has noticed that we're playing a 3 at the back. There's only one recognised centre forward, a centre half, you know, and I think other clubs would target that if we carried on with that kind of model on a regular basis.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I really don't disagree. And I think that I spoke to Aaron Downs, who I played with at Chesterfield for a bit in my career. He was assistant to Gary Johnson. I spoke to him after the game, and I was just saying to you know, well done and all whatever. I said, you know, your style just beat our style, didn't it? Like that. He says, yeah. He said that was the plan right from the get-go. He says that's why they played Cameron on the left side. He said they knew Michael Doyle has more touches than anything else. He said, but if you close the gaps around him, he's got nowhere to give it to, then they were happy with that, and they knew they'd be a threat aerially. They thought we were a small team, which essentially we are. So, well, certainly in comparison to them. So, you know, that goes to show a little bit of the psyche, a little bit of what was thinking from there. Now he's not going to tell me the absolute inside track on everything that they were doing, but obviously after you've won, you're a bit more loose-lipped than you would be if you'd not. So that's what's going to happen. That is what's going to happen. And again, I've got the results here, the running of the results, and we kept 3 clean sheets out of the last, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about the last 14 games, something like that.
Is that all it was? I didn't realize it was that low.
3 clean sheets, and it was Maidenhead, Wrexham, and Weymouth. Now, to me, they're not 3 of the most potent teams you're ever going to see. Wrexham was a brilliant defensive display, so they will cause anybody trouble. That was brilliant. To keep a clean sheet against Maidenhead, to keep a clean sheet against Weymouth, that's not something I shouldn't be doing. Right. So again, it means all them other teams have scored against us, but then we're back round in a circle again but we want more attacking football. We want to see attacking football. And if we see that and we've got results with it, chances are the opposition is going to score against you because you leave yourself more open. You know, it's like I saw Wealdstone early on in the season. They played at our place. I said they'll concede 100 goals, and I was wrong. They only conceded 99. So you know, it's you can see it a mile off. You know, when a team is open, you can be exploited so easily. And it is, again, you're back to that conundrum of being open and expansive, but then having players that can realise, switch on immediately that they give the ball away, and then get tight and close the space and condense the play. Again, you've got to win headers, you've got to be decisive. 2 set pieces conceded at the weekend, you can't allow that. It's not good enough at any level. So, like I said, I agree with you. It's an absolute coin toss. I'd want another centre half, but again, they've got to fit into the model of how you want to play. You want a 6'4" defender? We've got one, Ben Turner. But I don't think anybody wants Ben Turner to be coming into the team, particularly. That's no fault of Ben, who's had a great career, really good career. Just by being 6'4" doesn't make you the right fit for the team. And I know that's not what you were saying either. But this is the selection process, and this is the dilemma, because they will have this data on. There will probably be 100 centre halves, and 90 of them will be 6'2", 6'3". And you have to sort out, will he fit into what we want to do? Will he win enough headers? Will he be good enough with the ball in possession? Will he make the right decisions if we're playing a back 3? Will he make the right decisions in a back 2? Does he play left side? Does he play right side? Does he complement the players that we've already got in the building? And they're all the sorts of the basic choices, decisions you've got to get right when you're modelling. And Ian Burchnall will be doing this. We'll be modelling for his team for next season. And when he's, like I say, we still don't know. As I said it along, we still don't know. First game of the season, do you think he's going to play a back 3 or a back 4? We don't know. We absolutely don't know, because he's been playing this back 3 because of that's what he's got, and he sees as his best unit at his disposal now. But given free rein in the summer, given the owners say to him, you can go out and get, depending on who they release, who they keep, you can go out and get 7 or 8 new players. He might go and buy the players to go and play 4-4-2, to play 4-2-3-1, to do whatever. So, but he will know these are all the thought process, all the decisions, the things that he's going to have to do. Sitting down with Richard Montague and all the Football Radar analysts, and again sorting through the wheat from the chaff. Who's going to fit in? And it's only, again, it's not an exact science, so it's only your best guess. It's your best, optimistic sort of, he seems like he would fit in. But we all do that. Everyone who plays fantasy football tries and fits in what they think is the perfect team. There's only one winner every year in every league. It's difficult, and this division is difficult because there's only 2 teams going to get promoted at the end of the season. So it's a massive call, massive time of the year, and some really, really tough decisions to be made.
I'll throw one more name at you, because I know he's a player that sparks a lot of emotion among fans. Enzio Boldewijn. So signed the best part of £200,000 from Crawley when the club were in the league. We're coming to the end of his existing 3 years. What would you do with Enzio? Undoubtedly got ability.
Yeah. But
some will say, does he use that enough to influence games enough and score enough goals?
And the answer is no. For me, for the ability he's got, and really good lad, and obviously popular with the team, with the Maurice Ross incident and all that. No, he doesn't. He should affect games more, should influence them more. He's got the ability, and again, for whatever reason, hasn't shown it frequently enough. So what would I do with him? Again, comes down to money. And I've got it. I've heard rumours of, I say, paid 200,000 for him, so he's not then coming in on sort of 500 quid a week either. So I imagine he's coming on a lucrative contract, which has now come to an end. What I would say is he's a really good player, but does he do it often enough? Not for me. So again, I'd possibly look elsewhere. I'd thank him for everything he's done, but I'd possibly look elsewhere.
In answer to Ian Burchnall's question, and one asked earlier, can anyone sign Enzio due to Brexit? Yes, these players are already in the country, and so there are no restrictions on his options, just so you know that. Yeah, and Enzio is an enigma for a lot of people. And it's been interesting the role he's had in the 2 playoff games, aren't they? Because I think a lot of people were trying to work out exactly where he was trying to fit into a system that Ian was playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sometimes that is a problem for a player, because you know, with a 3, whatever you want to call it, 3-4-1-2, or whatever we played at the weekend, 3-5-2, however you wanted to go, with that triangle in midfield of Doyle sitting, Reeves and Enzio just in front of him, with Ruben up front with Kyle, then you think, oh, just getting in that pocket of space in between midfield and the strikers will be absolutely perfect for Enzio. Get the ball into him, get him turned and running a back 4 should be absolutely perfect. But it didn't materialise. His most effective bit was when he came on at right wing back against Chesterfield the week before, and he did really well, got on the front foot, produced some really good stuff, got some balls in from the byline. Brilliant. Yet he'd been tried as a right wing back a few games earlier with less success. So because with Enzio, I'm still looking at him after 3 years and thinking, I honestly don't know the best formation, the best position to get the best out of you. You know, that's the enigma bit of, there's talent in there. We've had 3 years of trying to unlock it, and he's scored some worldies. Let's have it right. He's scored some absolutely great goals. But has he done enough this season to earn another contract? Because that's what football is. It's employment at the end of the day. Has he done enough this season to earn another contract? Not for me. You know, not for me. Obviously, you make sure you've got somebody else lined up, somebody better to come in, or somebody who you think is better or going to be more effective, you know, to come in before you say that. And that's why I think all these decisions, or all these sort of discussions, happen before we get to the last game of the season. We have this conversation. You know, 90% of deals are sort of lined up, let's put it that way, rather than done deals. Has he done enough this season? I think he's been a good pro, a really good pro, not for the want of trying, really good ability, but I just don't think he's produced it enough to warrant another contract. And I think they may well look elsewhere.
Final question. Taking up lots of your time this evening, so thank you. How important is a fit Cal Roberts to Knox's aspirations of going up next season?
I would say absolutely vital. Absolutely vital. He's that big of a player. He's that good of a player. Again, all this talk and analysis and data, whatever you want to call it, it comes down to the basics of having good players in the building playing for your team. He is a good player who can do things that players at this level can't do, or not many players at this level can do. But as we've seen this season, he's got to be fit. He's got to be able to play. He's no disrespect, but it's the old saying, you're no help to the team if you're injured. But if he's fit, he's a massive component. He is, say it a lot again, you know, you look at how many players are on your team sheet. You talk about Shorty and Yatesy, who both, you know, I fortunate enough to play with them when they came to Derby and play against them when they were at Notts. But it doesn't matter whether they're centre half, centre forward, centre midfield players, fullbacks. If you look at players who have got ability, good players, really good players at whatever level you're playing at, you look at the opponent's team sheet. Every player does it. They get the team sheet for the game. You look at who you're playing against, who your opponent is. And if you see on the opponent's team, oh, he's good. Oh, he's what player is. Oh, he's good. He's good. You automatically think, oh, we're in for a tough time here. Cal Roberts is one of them players that at this level, the opposition will see his name on a team sheet and fear that we've got to do something about him. And the more players you have like that, that might, I say, he might not do anything, but it's the space that might be created for somebody else. And the top teams have got players that are threats. And even if you play like Gary Johnson at Torquay, you've got 5 or 6 players who are aerial threats. So when you get them set pieces lined up, oh, I'm marking him. We probably had Richard Brinley marking somebody 3 inches taller than him, Adam Chickson doing the same. But they're having to do a job, and 2 or 3 other players the same, trying to pick up players that are bigger than them, whether it's ability-wise in open play or from set pieces. You look at the opposition and think, "Crikey, that's going to give us a tough ask." Cal Roberts is an absolutely vital component. He's a match winner, and if he's a match winner consistently enough, he could be a league winner.
I thought of another question, so apologies.
Yeah, that's fine. It's only Spain, Sweden, isn't it? I'm not bothered about that one. It's all right.
I was reading a report somewhere with COVID, and there is an estimate that certainly in League Two and League One, or it's skewed by the likes of Sunderland still being in League One, that the average wage paid to players in those two divisions is down about 30%. Clearly, clubs haven't had gate revenues and so they've been taking loans out here, there, and everywhere, and all the rest of it. And so the average wage paid to a player has been driven down. Now that may help Notts at the minute, because clearly, outside of the Premier League, I've hardly seen a transfer fee paid by clubs, because they haven't got the cash, have they? They haven't got the ready cash at the minute. We spoke about us bringing players in. How much is there a danger, do you think, or is it mitigated because of COVID and not much cash around, of us losing players? Rodriguez is certainly one that is mentioned. Wootton is another. Roberts has been, but clearly is not fit. So I doubt anyone would want to come in for Kel Roberts until such point as he started playing and scoring again. Do you think there is a danger Notts could lose some of their better players?
Absolutely. Yeah, there always is. And the lower down you sink as a club, the bigger that danger becomes, because you have to offer something better than is being offered elsewhere. Of course you do. So, he'll pick whichever player. Kyle Wootton, if somebody comes in from League One for Kyle Wootton, who could sort of blame Kyle Wootton for going, they're going to double my wages and I'm going up back into the Football League? It's you couldn't expect realistically any player to not do that. League Two as well, it's back into the Football League. That's a big, well, it certainly was for me in my career, but like I say, it was a big thing, and I'm sure it is for players even now. Playing in the Football League, playing as high as you possibly can, it should always be a motivator, but there's a reality behind it that I didn't play for nothing. You wanted paying for playing, you wanted to earn money, so you've got obligations. It's no different to any other industry. Construction industry went through it years ago, didn't they? When that fell flat, people out of work, so you can't command any money. Now everybody's building HS2, prices go through the roof. They can command what they want, and football is the same. It's like any industry. It contracts and it expands. There are good times and bad times. They absolutely could be preyed upon by some bigger clubs. The thing that Notts have got going is you've got to go a fair step above to have a bigger club in terms of infrastructure, stadium, facilities, and from what I'm led to believe, with no knowledge, but I'm an educated guess, is that the budget is a decent budget at the level. So you'd still have to step up. So I would imagine it's on a par with a lot of League Two budgets. So you'd have to make a considerable step up for somebody to turn somebody's head, I think. Yeah. But that's not to say it couldn't happen.
Yeah, my point, I kind of guess, is, do you think someone like Ruben or Kyle have done enough for a League Two club to come in, or do you think the jury's still out a bit? Ruben, okay, he's done it for 8 games. You spoke about consistency. Kyle has got a decent goals return. He's at a decent age. Do you think they've done enough, or do you think Notts are going to be okay in the current climate?
I think they'll be okay in the current climate. I think if I was, if I was Jason Turner thinking, when am I going to field any phone calls about, I think I'd expect that phone call to be about Kyle Wootton,
okay,
rather than Ruben Rodriguez. I think just because he's done it for a couple of seasons, I think the size that he is again, anybody looking at the stats will like that. The fact that he's a big man, he'd come back for set pieces. Ruben, I think, has got to do it a little bit more consistently. Undoubted potential. Ruben, I would put in the same sort of position as Enzio was after sort of a year of him at Notts, where you see some real good stuff, some quiet bits, some games where he, sort of floats around the periphery and what have you. So can he make that next step? I mean, I found that interesting, and I'm not saying I was over the moon with his comment at the end of the game, and I give him all sorts of slack because they just got beat in the playoffs and he feeling gutted and all that sort of thing. But the way when Charlie asked him, how do you think your season's gone? And he knew his stats off by heart, despite he just scored 12 at 7 assists. I'm not sure I carry him out his stats in my wallet like that. And if you think 12 goals and 7 assists is a good season in the non-league, then you need to set your sights a little bit higher. So I want to see him push on. So in terms of the question, I think teams would look at Kyle Wootton. I think Ruben Rodriguez will be on teams' radar, but I think they would want to take a bit more convincing.
Okay. Final one. Of all the players out of contract and those on loan going back, who do you think is the single most important one to get signed back up? Because clearly Notts can offer contracts
to
players and they can go somewhere else. Like you, I don't think Mark Ellis is going to be too short of options.
No.
If Notts really wants him, because he's a perfect fit for just about any club in the National League at the top end wanting to get up, and may well be some League Two clubs looking at him. So if there was one that's out of contract, who do you think is the most important to get back signed and in the club?
Just remind me who's out of contract.
I knew you were going to buy yourself time. I knew you could. But, right.
Well, my initial thought, somebody who would definitely sign it would be Sam Slocum. But I'm not saying he's the most important, because there are other goalkeepers that can do it, out there. But I would immediately, no questions asked, I would want to sign him back up again for next season. Give us the list of the other names and I'll tell you who I think is the most. But I would love to sign Mark Ellis. I think he'd be a great addition. But just the fact that they haven't offered him anything makes me wonder, have they left it a little bit late? He'll be getting offers from elsewhere. So, we'll see. So go on, give us that list, Paul.
The list, as I understand this.
Yeah, go on.
Slocum, Turner, Rawlinson, McCrory, Chickson, Barnett, Kelly Evans. That's a lot of ruddy defenders there, isn't it? Crikey. O'Brien, Doyle, Enzio. And the loan players, Knowles, Ellis, Miller, Griffiths.
Right. For varying reasons, and to keep the answer short, I'd go Doyle, DKE, Slocum, and Mark Ellis. If I could pick 4 for varying reasons.
Very good. It's an interesting one. I'll be careful how I phrase this. You're a pro. I've been around the game a long time. We all know how footballers' minds can be focused when their contract is ending. I'm going to be very cynical on the professional football profession. There aren't too many players who aren't fit and aren't running through a brick wall in the final 2 months of when their contracts are expiring. And that's a terrible generalization, but you kind of know the point I'm making. And one player that would fit in there, having not had the greatest of times under Neal Ardley, but under Ian Burchnall and been released by Harrogate, is our own Kelvin Miller on the left, who has looked, let's be honest, brilliant, taking players on, pushing up. When he first came at a left wing back, didn't really look his best position. James Belshaw said to us on the show, that's not, he's better further up than at the back. What about Kelvin Miller?
I think he's been excellent. And if there's a deal to be done there, again, at the right price, then I see no problems in having him back. Absolutely no problems in offering him something to come back again. But they might have identified somebody else. But if they haven't, absolutely no problem, because he was flying at the end of the season. Again, all this, fancy football stuff comes back to players look totally different when they're in form to when they're out of form. And that's that. It's not because of any coaching shenanigans that's gone on behind the scenes. Usually it's not because the manager's a good manager one week, bad manager the next week. It's 99% of the time, It comes down to the form that the player is in. So that's why Calvin Miller, 3 months ago, when he had a game or two, came in and he thought, yeah, all right. To Calvin Miller at the end of the season, looks absolute world beater. You know, fantastic. Ruben Rodriguez, exactly the same. 12 games ago, you'd look at him and when I say he wasn't getting in the team, and you weren't saying, well, he's got a bit of quality, but he's not really doing enough. To the running, looks absolutely phenomenal. Looks like he's got the key to unlock any defence and cause problems. You could label that at a lot of players. Adam Chickson at the start of the season wasn't getting a game. Comes in, new manager, obviously sees something in him, finds a way, and comes in and does well. It's no coincidence that when players are playing better, the team does better. And people go, well, which side of the coin is that? The team does better, the players play better. It's a 6 and 2 threes, of course it is. But a lot of the time, we all look for this mysterious. What's the reason? Why is this? Why is he playing so well now? What happened before? It must be a new manager. It must be a new system. It must be this. No, sometimes you're out of form, and sometimes you're full of confidence and bang in form. And like we said early on in the season, toward the end of Neal Ardley's reign, the players look bang out, low on confidence, bang out of form, even though they were scraping results and doing all right. But it's a totally different looking team, despite the personnel not changing massively come the end of the season. But that is the peaks and troughs of form in a footballer. And as we say, the lower down the pyramid you go, then peaks and troughs, are a little bit more up and down and all over the place.
Few of our listeners and viewers volunteering some of their key ones. David Amy, Miller, DKE and Chickson, NCFC Pi, DKE 100%, Pythagorean, Slocum, DKE and Ellis, Ian Burchnall, Miller for me, would love to see him with us next season. One constant through most of those, small sample that it is, Dion Kelly-Evans. We've not said much about him on the show tonight, but he's certainly one of those that's got a bit of devilment in him, isn't he?
Yeah, he's he's a little bit unlucky because I say we've had this conversation about where does he actually slot in, what's his best position, and he was up against Richard Brinley, but they both played at the weekend again, and it's no fault of Dion Kelly-Evans that Gary Johnson's analysed Notts, thought they might have a small right wing back and put his big centre half as a left winger, and hey presto, he's up against Dion Kelly-Evans, and like I say, Dion Kelly-Evans will win headers against most lads, no matter what size they are. He'll give more than most other people. So I would absolutely want to keep him at the club. Absolutely, where you fit him in and how you fit him in, that's for another time. But he's the sort of player that you need around the place, because I think his energy, his combativeness, is just, it's enthusiasm. It's contagious. And I think with same as I'd say about Michael Doyle, the right characters around the place, it's more than sometimes what they do on the pitch, it's what they personify, and it's what they give. And the fans absolutely love him anyway, which don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate having players that the fans actually love. Again, you can go back to Mark Ellis, I think, who's got the making of a bit of a cult hero status potentially if he stays. He's already sort of got one foot under the table already, so to speak, with what he's done so far. So I think that would lift the fan base as well if they announce the signing of Mark Ellis. So things like that can just help, and all these things will be thought about, of course, in the close season. Just give everybody a lift, because at the end of the day, they've got to sell season tickets again for next season. So fans want some encouragement to part with their hard-earned money.
Stel, we're now into the 9th minute over the 90. So we must let you go away. Thank you on behalf of all our viewers and listeners, and from me and my lad Harry on a personal level, for volunteering your time. I know the rates of pay aren't great at the BBC. They're absolute, for the Magpie Circle, they're absolutely non-existent. It's what I used to.
Yes, it's about on a par then with the BBC. But yeah, no problem, Paul. Enjoy it. Like I say, not a problem. I'll talk football with anybody, anytime, anywhere. So I absolutely enjoy it. No problem, especially talking about Notts. I hope everyone has a good summer despite the result at the weekend.
I was going to, and finally, as they always say in the best traditions, what are you going to be doing with yourself on a Saturday?
Playing cricket.
Before we get back. Go on.
Playing cricket.
Still play?
Yes. Yes. Badly, but I still play.
You're not going to tell me you're a fast bowler. You've got to be a batsman.
Paul, the word fast has never been associated with me ever in any respect of anything. No, I'm a batsman. I'm a left-handed batsman.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a go. Yeah, I have a go. I do enjoy my cricket, to be honest. So yeah, it's nice. So that's what I'll be doing.
Very good.
Yes.
Is that a clash of loyalties when not start playing pre-season friendlies and you're supposed to be opening the batting?
No, I'm still opening the batting. You're right. Right. It depends on the game, depends on the COVID situation, to be honest. But yeah, that's my summer retreat, if you like. While the body will still do something like anything, I'll play a bit of cricket. Yeah.
Very good. And finally, from NCFC Pie, your Euro prediction. Okay, who's going to win it? How far will England get?
Oh, I'd like to see England win it. I think they've got a chance. I think they need to improve from yesterday. But they weren't bad for the first game. I can't look past France. They've got all the quality players, haven't they? They've sort of done it before. I'd love to see England, though. I think if England could make home advantage count, you never know. But I think England have got a chance. They've got a really good chance. But outside of them two, Portugal maybe an outsider, but it depends on they've had COVID positive, haven't they? So Italy look good. Sitting on the fence, I'll name as many countries as I possibly can. But France or England? I'm going to go France or England. I want England to win. I think France might.
You can never rule the Germans out, Stel.
No, I just have done. But no, you're right. I don't think they're quite as strong as they have been in recent years. So, but again, I don't watch that much international football, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But it's a bit like nuts, really. Hey, presto, they still ask me.
Hey, we will let you get back in the nets. All the best with the cricket. Thank you. This will be your last appearance. We've got one more show, listeners. I'm not sure who we're going to rope in, but we are going to have one more show when we will be dissecting who has and hasn't been retained and offered new contracts, which I think is going to be very, very interesting indeed. Mark, thank you for all your time. We all enjoy. Well, actually, I never listen to you, to be honest, because I'm always at the game, home or away. But look, all the people here tell me you're top draw. You and Charlie are top draw. So thank you very, very much indeed. Have a good summer and look forward to welcoming you back to Meadow Lane and to the Magpie Circle. It's quite a late start back, August the 21st, folks, isn't it, when we're playing league football? So until then, have a good one.
Yeah.